Hi students, this is my last lecture video for the course, and in this video I'm going to talk about the end of the Reconstruction period. So we're moving into the 1870s now. The Republicans have been a dominant party in Congress for so long that we actually start to see a split developing between the Republicans. Remember, apart from the abolition of slavery, the main goal that had united the Republican Party, that connected it back to the Federalist Party, was the idea of more integration of the states under a more powerful federal government. And during the 1870s, the beginning of the 1870s, we actually see a reaction against this from within the Republican Party. The so-called liberal Republicans argue for free trade and lower tariffs in order to reduce the ability of the federal government to show preference to or prioritize certain businesses like factories and railroad businesses over others. But these Republicans are defeated in the election of 1872, and Ulysses S. Grant wins a second term in office. The second term is not especially successful, partly because it's characterized by the Panic of 1873. The Panic of 1873 stemmed from a debate about currency. Should the United States currency be based mostly on paper money, now known as greenbacks, or should it be based on gold and precious metals? Grant sides with those who are promoting a currency based mostly on gold and precious metals. The issue with this is that it stalls the economy. It means simply that there is less money available. The money supply has been decreased. And this means that the economy is not going to grow as quickly. Now, if you have too much paper money, then the economy becomes worthless. So it's not as though just the more money you make, the more money you have. But when you do what Grant does here, it means that you are reducing the amount of money in circulation to try and give money more value. What happens in this case is that a lot of businesses and a lot of banks kind of tighten their purse strings, and you start to see businesses closing, you start to see wages being cut, you start to see millions of Americans without employment. And so this economic depression, the greatest depression that the United States had seen at the time, is the background to the election of 1876. The election of 1876 is one in which we see, the election of 1876 is one in which we see corruption rife throughout the whole period of the election. We have Democrats who are suppressing votes in southern states through acts of terrorism against African American voters. And then we have Republican military governors who are using their positions in southern states to throw these elections for the Republicans. And so in the end, you have this highly contested election in which the Democrat candidate seems certain to win. He has all but one of the electoral college votes that he needs before, with 20 left to be counted, and somehow all 20 of them go to his Republican opponent, his Republican opponent, Rutherford Hayes. And the Democrats lodge a complaint, the Republicans lodge complaints. No one can really seem to come to a clear decision as to who is more at fault with all the corruption that's taken place. So in the end, Congress comes to a decision and votes to award the election to the Republicans and to Rutherford Hayes. And it's only later that it emerges that the Democrats had conceded this election as part of a compromise that's called the Compromise of 1877. And this compromise meant that the Democrats were willing to concede the election to Hayes on the understanding that Hayes would end northern military occupation of the South. And without the presence of American troops enforcing some of the programs of Reconstruction, historians see this as the end of the period of Reconstruction after the Civil War. So what's the legacy of the Reconstruction period as we come to the end here? One, it increases the power of the federal government. The federal government more and more is interacting directly with its citizens and is bypassing the state. By some people, this is seen as a suppression of the states, a military tyranny ruling over the South. So that's one legacy of Reconstruction. The power of the federal government increases again. Another legacy is a failure of the efforts of the radical Republicans to establish equal treatment for whites and African Americans. That many African Americans, by the time we come to the end of the Reconstruction period, still suffer from acts of violence when they try and vote, still are extremely poor, still do not have the same access to opportunities that white Americans in the South have access to. And so for many African Americans, kind of in a different way, things like the sharecropping system, many people argue that they have been re-enslaved or that their condition has not changed that much. Nevertheless, one final legacy of the Reconstruction is the passing of the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendments to the Constitution, which provide a vital foundation for further civil rights reform as we move later into American history.